So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for the warm welcome. And I got a chance to experience the community in Gardner and the surrounding areas today. And you guys have a beautiful community. Hold on a second here.
He uses a Macintosh, so we're not sure he's going to get this up here.
Okay, so East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice, we're a community-based organization. And just a little bit about myself. By trade, I'm a mechanic. I really never had any intention of doing this type of work. 10 years ago, I never imagined myself like before a group of people talking about this issue. But because I grew up in this community surrounded by rail yards, I found myself in this field. So we started this organization as a group of residents in the city of Commerce, and that's about 5 miles southeast of downtown Los Angeles. And in the 80s, the rail yards in the Commerce neighborhood kind of changed their operations from freight rail yards to intermodal rail yards. And because of that operation, we've seen a huge jump in activity, a huge jump in traffic from trucks and trains, and all the other types of services that industries that service the intermodal industry. And with that, we saw tons of health impacts in our community from children and from the elders in our community. And just a show of hands, how many folks in the room have a family member that has asthma? So that's one of the first things that we did when we started our organization. And after that, they transferred the rail yards from freight yards to intermodal facilities. The whole room pretty much had their hands up. And so it's one of the reasons that I dedicated my life to this work. And we know that the impacts from the rail yards will make those our triggers for the children, our family members that you do have that have asthma. And so this is really important. And if you have a family member that has asthma, you know how severe it can be sometimes. And it's not just a small issue. So this is an aerial photo of our community, and you can see the LA River kind of goes through it. There's 2 rail yards. They're kind of on the upper left-hand corner. And the one on the bottom part is the Hobart Yard, which is a BNSF yard. The one on top is the UP Yard, and the freeway that kind of goes right through the two of them is the 710 freeway, which you saw the picture of that Andrew showed you. The BNSF yard on the bottom is similar to what's being proposed in Gardner from BNSF, and it handles about 1.4 million lifts a year. And all the large buildings around that neighborhood are now mostly warehousing and distribution centers. And so we've seen a shift in the activity the industry going from manufacturing to now goods movement and logistics. And that's a huge, when we think about jobs, it's a huge shift in the type of jobs that we have. And when I grew up in the city of Commerce, we used to have these union halls and banks in our community. And now those union halls have closed, and we have temp service offices and check cashing facilities. And it just changes the whole dynamic of the workforce in our community. The temp service jobs are temporary, low-wage jobs, and bring people from all over the LA County area to work in these warehouses that have high turnover rates. This is the Hobart Yard, and you can see downtown Los Angeles in the background. Basically, 1.4 million TEUs containers coming through here. And you can see that they're stacked up. And this is just basically saturating our community. This is inside the yard, but you can imagine that there's about just as many containers throughout the community as well. Whoops, wrong direction. That's a UP yard across the street. And what I wanted to do is just kind of show you some photographs of the community that I'm from. And I'm just going to go through them and talk about them a little bit. This is a locomotive that is being load tested. Every locomotive that goes through that yard has to be load tested. It basically goes through diagnostics. They tune it up and they test it in high notch, which basically means they step on the gas for about 15, 20 minutes. And so every locomotive that goes through there has to go through this particular test, and so you have a lot of diesel emissions in their community. And you see these these tanks here. These are water treatment tanks, and so when they're doing these maintenance on the locomotives, they basically have a lot of soot and oil and things of that nature on the locomotive, and they have to clean the locomotive off, and they treat the water before they put it into the storm drain. In 2003, there was a huge leak in one of these containers, and it completely flooded the neighborhood, and it was about 20% of the fluid was diesel fuel, and so it completely ruined that neighborhood. And so from what I understand, a lot of people can't grow the food or the plants that they used to have in their community. Oops, I keep going backwards. That's another locomotive smoking. That's a locomotive right near a park that I spent a lot of time in, and the 710 freeway going right by it. This is the Hobart yard, where they have all these containers would be full containers coming from China or Southeast Asia, and then the trucks going to pick them up and then going through our neighborhood. And so you have the intermodal facility with all the locomotives and all of the equipment that operates changes the containers from the trains to the trucks, but then you have trucks going through our neighborhood. And so this is an example of trucks going through our neighborhood, more trucks, and more trucks. And this is not just in their truck route, but you see these trucks going through our communities into residential neighborhoods, and you can see the interaction between our community members and the trucks that go through our neighborhood. We talk a lot about air pollution, but there are other sources of pollution or negative impacts to our community. And here you see one of the local high school students practicing basketball. This was about 10 o'clock at night, and the entire area is lit up from the lights. Once they put up an intermodal facility, the second thing they do is just put up these huge stadium lights, and so there's tons of lights in the neighborhood, so light pollution is another consideration. This is Bob Eula. He's been living in the community since 1940. Before the railroads came, he was in that neighborhood. There was no rail yards. It was actually farms, small farms, and the railroad came in and built these rail yards. You can see the stadium lights behind them from this facility, and that particular light goes right into his bedroom. When they put up this new crane, they put up these new lights, and he has this direct path right into his bedroom, and he's had to put up these huge black, kinds of pane blocks to block out the light so he can sleep at night. And also do a whole bunch of other things that would have reduced the impacts, air filtration system in his home, double pane windows, yard hostlers. These are the tractors that move the containers around in the yard, and they are supposed to be off-road vehicles, but we find that they go onto our streets, and the thing about them being off-road vehicles is, one, that they don't have the same type of safety requirements. They're supposed to be off the streets, and then they have higher diesel emissions. Another thing to consider is, and this was in 2003, a derailment in the city of Commerce. This is actually from a freight train that was in that local neighborhood. It derailed. They actually derailed it in the community on purpose. It was a runaway train, and they decided to derail it in the neighborhood. It leveled 4 homes. Luckily, it was lumber on this train, and it wasn't some type of chemical container or other container that holds chemicals. Luckily, there was nobody in these homes. It was during work and school hours, so nobody was injured, and they renamed this street Miracle Street. Just something to consider that we've already experienced as these accidents, right? The accident that I talked about, the leak of the water treatment system, and then this derailment, and then numerous accidents or spills from these containers. You never know what's in the containers,